The rattle in the diesel engine was the first thing I noticed, and I noticed it before I even saw the truck. My name's Jenna Ostrander, and I run third shift out of a two-bus station outside Cincinnati, the kind of place where the coffee's always burnt and the radio never really goes quiet. 7 years in, and I thought I'd stop noticing things like engines. You stop noticing a lot after 7 years. You learn to keep your eyes on the patient and your hands steady and everything else blurred at the edges, because the edges are where the bad stuff lives, the stuff that keeps you up at 4 in the morning replaying a call you can't change. So when Engine 9 rolled up behind my rig on a Tuesday in March for a woman down with chest pain in a parking garage on Vine Street, I told myself it meant nothing that I recognized the sound of that particular truck before the doors even opened. Coincidence. Big city, lots of trucks, lots of engines. I'd tell you the odds if I'd bothered to do the math, but I hadn't, because doing the math would have meant admitting I cared about the answer. He came around the front bumper the way he always did, unhurried, like nothing in this job ever needed to be raced toward, just met. Silas Reyes. 6 years on the ladder truck, hands like he'd been born gripping a hydraulic spreader, and a way of crouching down next to a patient that made them stop looking so scared before he'd even said a word. I'd worked exactly 4 calls with him in 18 months before that March. This made 5. Ostrander, he said, like we were old colleagues instead of two people who'd crossed paths 4 times in a decade of shift work. Small world, small city, I said, snapping my gloves on because I needed my hands busy so I wouldn't think about how he said my name like it meant something. The call went the way calls go. Fast, then slow, then fast again, the woman stabilizing enough that I could breathe. Silas holding the stairwell door so we could get the stretcher through without catching a wheel. He didn't get in my way. He never did. He had this habit of anticipating exactly what I needed a half second before I asked for it, which should have felt like a coincidence too, except by the 4th time it happened. I started to wonder if he was paying that much attention to me, specifically, or if he was just good at his job. Both, probably. That was almost worse. I didn't think about him again. I told myself I didn't, until the following month, a 2-car wreck on the interstate on-ramp, sleet coming down sideways, and there he was again, cutting a door off a Honda with the kind of patience that made the driver inside stop screaming and start just crying instead, which is progress in this line of work. We didn't talk much that night. There wasn't time. But when I climbed into the back of my rig with the patient stabilized, I caught him watching the doors close, and something about the way he did it. Not staring, just watching. The way you watch something you don't want to lose track of. Stayed with me longer than the call did. 3rd time was the parking garage again. Different woman, different chest pain, same city being smaller than 400,000 people should allow. And this time, after we'd cleared the scene, he leaned against the bay doors of my rig while I finished my paperwork under the domolite, arms crossed, in no hurry to leave. "You gonna tell me this is a coincidence again?" he said. "It is a coincidence." 3 times in 6 weeks on shifts we don't share a rotation with? He tilted his head. I checked. We're not even supposed to be crossing paths this much. That stopped my pen. "You checked?" "I got curious," he said, and had the decency to look a little embarrassed about it, which for a man his size, in full turnout gear, streetlight catching the soot on his jaw, was somehow the most disarming thing I'd seen all year. Figured there had to be a reason 9 kept getting sent wherever 12 was already parked. I should tell you I have a rule. Most of us do, working this job. You don't get involved with anyone in the department because the shifts eat every relationship alive anyway, and mixing work with your heart just means you carry the bad calls home twice, once for the patient and once for whoever you're worried is out there catching hell on their own truck. I'd watched it wreck 2 marriages already, watched a friend of mine quit the service entirely rather than keep working next to the man she used to love. I'd built the rule out of other people's wreckage, and I trusted it, the way you trust a seatbelt. Not because you enjoy wearing it, but because you've seen what happens when you don't. "I don't date guys from the department," I said, which was true, and also the safest thing to say. And also, if I'm honest, a door I left open about 6 inches instead of closing all the way. "Didn't ask you to," he said, easy, no offense in it. Just said it's a small world. Then, quieter, like he hadn't meant to say it out loud. "Doesn't mean I'm not glad it keeps happening." I drove back to the station that night, going over it in my head. The whole thing, wondering if I was building a feeling out of nothing more than shared bad hours and a man who was good at his job and easy to look at under emergency lighting, which is a strange kind of lighting to fall for someone in. All reds and blues and nothing soft about it. Maybe you know that particular arithmetic. How the people who show up for the worst nights of your life start to feel like they belong in the good ones too, even when you've got no proof of it beyond a handful of parking garages and a busted up Honda. 6 weeks after that, no calls, nothing, and I told myself that settled it. Coincidence? Closed chapter. Back to the rule. Then in May, I got sent to a 2-story colonial off Erie Avenue for a fall, elderly man, and I recognized the address before dispatch even finished the sentence because I'd been there twice before for his wife, years back, when I was still riding third seat as a rookie. Old habits. I remembered houses the way some people remember faces. Engine 9 was already on scene when I pulled up. Of course it was. Silas met me at the door, and something in his face was different this time, careful in a way it hadn't been before, and he said, "Low, just for me, it's not good, Jenna. He's the second call for this address in a year. I remember the wife." He remembered the wife, too. Of course he did. We worked that one together in the kind of silence that doesn't need filling, the two of us moving like we'd rehearsed it, and when it was over. When we'd done everything there was to do, and it still wasn't enough, because sometimes it isn't, and that's a truth this job teaches you, whether you want the lesson or not. I found myself sitting on the tailgate of my rig afterward, not quite steady, and he sat down next to me without asking permission, which somehow felt like exactly the right amount of permission to ask. "You okay?" he said. "No," I said, because I was done pretending around him, at least about that. We sat there a long while, streetlights coming on, neither of us saying much, and I remember thinking that I'd spent 7 years building a wall between this job and my heart, brick by brick, call by call, and here was a man who kept showing up on the other side of it without even trying to climb over. Like maybe the wall wasn't as necessary as I'd told myself, or maybe it was necessary and I was choosing to risk it anyway, and I honestly still don't know which of those is the wiser way to. Live. I've turned it over plenty of times since whether the smart thing is protecting your heart from a job that already asks so much of it or letting someone in anyway because the good nights need company as much as the bad ones do. "For what it's worth," he said finally, "I didn't check the schedules again. After that first time, I stopped keeping track." "Why?" "Because it started feeling less like tracking a coincidence," he said, "and more like waiting to see you." I didn't say anything to that. Not that night. But 3 weeks later, off shift, out of uniform, no radios and no lights, I texted him and asked if he wanted to get coffee somewhere that wasn't attached to an emergency. He wrote back in about 4 seconds, which for a man usually so unhurried told me everything I needed to know about how long he'd been waiting for me to ask. It's been 8 months now. We still get sent to the same calls sometimes, and it still isn't really a coincidence. Turns out our districts just overlap more than either of us realized, a plain, unglamorous fact that took the mystery clean out of it and somehow made the whole thing feel more solid instead of less, like finding out the ground under you was never magic, just good, ordinary earth that could hold your weight. I keep the rule for everyone else. I broke it exactly once, for exactly one person, and some nights, driving back to the station past midnight with the radio quiet and the city asleep, I think about that engine rattle I used to hear before the doors even opened, and how I used to be so sure that noticing it meant nothing at all.